This is a very large OTA, potentially one of the largest we've gotten in quite a few months. It's got a bunch of big changes, a bunch of things to correct some of the meta decks, but also ignores a couple of the cards that I personally feel like are a little bit stronger. But let's break everything down right now. Mr. Fantastic First Steps, just the OTA immediately following his season, is getting hit. Galactus is very happy sitting over there in the corner because his rival, Reed Richards, Pedro Pascal, is going to be taking a bit of a hit here, going from a 2-2 originally to a 3-4. And Second Dinner said that in the last few OTAs, they've been placing an emphasis on slowly trimming some strength from just tech cards in general, and specifically trying to get down what they call mid-range strategies that emphasize having rate cards over their own synergistic game plan. What that means is those tech decks that use cards like Mr. Fantastic First Steps, and then just a pile of tech cards to do a bunch of tech and just put out enough power and or kick your opponent's sandcastle enough in order so that you can't win the game. And they're trying to hit those down, and I think it's a really good change. I love the fact that they are going to be doing this. And there's another issue with Mr. Fantastic First Steps, is that he's also a 2-cost card that is just giving you too much value, which also Second Dinner says is an issue, and they need to evaluate how these scalers, how these cards that are going to be so beneficial, these so ubiquitous everywhere that you can see in the metagame, which, by the way, Mr. Fantastic First Steps, before the OTA, over the last 30 days, he had a 50% play rate about in post-infinite, and that percentage only increases the higher up in the infinite brackets you actually look. So this is a very good change, just straight away, and I think it's really great. So that's the first issue, is being too much of a card that people can put inside of tech rate cards. Secondary issue is the fact that he's just a 2-cost card, which provides way too much value. And the third issue is that he's an end of turn card. And Second Dinner even specifies in their notes, there is a end of turn problem. The end of turn decks are just too good, and they exceed what Second Dinner says is manageable. So they can't just do a couple of minor stat tweaks to just, hit him down with the point of power. They can't just do any other small things to these decks. They have to take a very heavy-handed approach to these piles of cards, because they've now introduced in one season a bunch of new cards that provide a bunch of new synergies and a bunch of new power. So it really makes sense they're having to pull this deck straight down, because all of these cards that they didn't plan around being synergistic in the past, like Sunspot from the last OTA, they now have to rebalance for the synergy potential, for all this combo issues. So they also have to take him down as well, and it's a good change. I think this is a really solid one, and I'm glad they're going to be trying to figure out how each of these costs inside of Marvel Snap need to be working. I think it's going to make a lot of sense here, and I think 2-cost cards have really kind of struggled for a bit, in that we've had just cards that are consistently jumping in this 2-cost slot being the best on-rate card, because it's just a card you can play on the for the early game and just continue getting benefits throughout the rest of it. What is it? We had Iron Patriot. We've had the Sam Wilson Captain America. We've now had Mr. Fantastic First Steps, and that's not it. We actually had another card the season before Mr. Fantastic First Steps season, in which they also did another big change. And a lot of these OTA changes actually are coming in pairs. So let's talk about the other half of this big shakeup to the meta. On the other half of that coin, we do have Surge, the other 2-cost scaler that has been amazing inside of decks. According to the same, by the way, stats that we do have from Mr. Fantastic First Steps, she is number 2 inside of post-infinite data for the last 30 days, whereas Mr. Fantastic First Steps is number 1. Both these 2-cost cards are giving you such amazing value in terms of allowing you to cheat your cards out sooner, as well as just putting additional power into your cards. Both of them felt really solid, and they said straight up that these 2-cost cards have a ubiquity problem, showing up at a play rate that we do not believe is sustainable for the long-term health of the game. Now, I will say that the public stats are never going to be 100% accurate, so there is a bit of subject to change there, but the fact that Second Dinner is saying straight up that these 2 cards are showing at a play rate that is just unsustainable makes me feel like they must have been even higher, or potentially just about accurate, in what we saw publicly. These are just really good cards. They were both really solid, and I'm glad the Surge is taking a single hit here, only going from 2-2 to a 2-1, which is only 1 point of power. But it does mean that when you put her on the board, she's not even giving you as much power as a common 1-cost card, which is a very big deal. So this is going to be, when you put this down on turn 2, you're not going to be able to fight for an earlier game, especially with all these cards that are really going to be enjoying priority or playing for more locations earlier inside of the game. you're getting even less value out of Surge, in which you really can't win with anything. Even a simple Squirrel now puts down as much power as Surge does, which maybe is flavor, whatever. I don't know. Squirrel Girl beat Thanos apparently when no one was looking, so I think it works for me. But legitimately, this is just a really great change. I think both of these two cards have been really solid and really powerful inside of the metagame for a bit. And I'm glad that they're starting this OTA off with a lot of really big changes. This is a metagame imbalance. Everything has been very off kilter, allowing you to put a lot of hand buff stuff, which I do really enjoy hand buff. But if you've seen my content, I haven't actually been playing a lot of hand buff because it didn't feel as fun to me. Because straight up, these cards are too good. When a deck is too good, when a card is too good, I enjoy it less. And yes, it does. I'm still going to be using it inside of a lot of the decks, but it doesn't give me as much enjoyment. It doesn't feel as fun for me when I'm playing a card that I feel like is really that strong. And I'm glad that Surge is going to be taking this hit. I'm glad that Mr. Fantastic First Steps are both going to be taking hits here. There's going to be the world where people are going to be like, all right, you just put Mr. Fantastic First Steps inside of Surfer. Yeah, that's how a 3-cost card has to exist. You can even now go Surge into Mr. Fantastic First Steps to let those triggers continue happening inside of your Surfer build. And that may be a really good deck. But this is definitely a pair of changes that are really needed. These 2-cost cards have been way too powerful, way too much as just the best 2-cost card. If you've needed a 2-cost card, or even a card inside of your deck that is just any sort of way in order for you to get more rate in your cards, typically it's one of these two. So I'm glad that both of them are going to be taking a bit of a hit here, as well as it does allow the metagame to kind of settle out and figure out where these 2-cost cards need to be lying, as similarly to 4-cost cards, they needed to figure out the power for them. Tech cards also, like all these cards were just too good, especially again in combination with tech cards, in combination with 4-cost cards. There were so many big combo potentials, so many big things, and I'm glad to see that these 2-cost scalars are going to be pulled down just a little bit. Now there are still other 2-cost scalars inside of the meta, and one of the other ones is a card that I wouldn't have expected to get hit in the next part of this OTA. The end of turn deck is really good. Second Dinner says it, and apparently it's so good that Havoc needs this change. And this is a change that I had actually seen online a little bit, and I didn't feel like it would actually occur. Havoc going from a 2-0 with the end of turn ability, you lose 1 max energy, and this gains +4 power, to being a 2-1 end of turn, you lose 1 max energy, and this gains +3 power. This end of turn deck really feeling like it's really unbalanced. And it's a weird thing for me to say straight away, but the fact that they had to change both this card and Sunswap because of the end of turn deck being way too beneficial really makes me feel like I don't know how good this keyword is. I don't know how good it is that Invisible Woman First Steps really involves herself into this brand new keyword and gives you a retriggering ability. Now, to be fair, it makes sense that they wanted to put this keyword in the game because it does help them simplify text in future cards. It does help there, and it does make sense on that front very particularly. However, the specific synergy here of just retriggering abilities is a bit dangerous. It's a bit much, and so they wanted to be able to pull it down a little bit. And I honestly, this is the only other change to the actual end of turn deck. They said they're fine with the way that this like Rube Goldberg machine, right, where you do one thing and then it works into another thing, works into another thing, putting all these pieces together into a big payout is what they want from this Invisible Woman First Step style of deck. But they also said that the numbers are just scaling too high, and there's not really a good amount of counterplay, and it's just easy to win against. The biggest card that we've seen to stop it all has been Supergiant, and they had to say, hey, is this gonna work? It didn't, but I'm glad they're at least toning down Havoc a little bit. I do think he was powerful. I didn't enjoy losing against him. It does mean that his first trigger is gonna be the exact same as it was before, but every trigger following is going to be giving you less power in return. So we'll see how well this does. The two things I really don't enjoy about this is, for one, it really hurts those decks that I enjoyed in the past, where it was the Bast Spice Rack, the small ball decks, if you've heard them by one of those names, where you would put Bast, Agent Venom, and stuff like that inside of a deck with this card or whatever, in order to get a little bit of extra power at the end of the game and make this benefit really good. It does make that deck a little bit worse because, for one, you lose the benefit of making Havoc a 2-3, so you're going to get 1 less power straight away from either Bast or from Agent Venom. Secondarily, you get less power with its scaling, so we'll see how it actually works. But in general, I think this is going to be a good change to this end of turn style of deck. I do wish that we were seeing an Invisible Woman First Steps change, or even like maybe even just a Prodigy point of power being taken away. We're not seeing either of those things here, and it's not just because they're going to say that, hey, we're fine with these decks existing, we're fine with the power output these cards are putting down. They aren't. They actively aren't. They actually are doing a really big change that, I'm be honest, I saw no one predict coming, no one was talking about, and is most likely going to be the end of turn decks. Contrary to my previous OTA thumbnail, this might actually be it. Y'all remember Ghost? The 1-2 ongoing, your cards are always revealed last, aka their on-reveal abilities happen last, or the 3-5 ongoing then, who just hasn't worked in any way, shape, or form since it got released. Ghost has just not been a card that has worked well in Marvel Snap. It has never found its place, and she's been really struggling, especially considering they put her just inside of Thunderbolts recently. And according to that thing where Marvel did all those chairs and whatever, I'm pretty sure the actress for Ghost is gonna be inside of the next Avengers movie. So, I mean, why not put these cool cards, these cool characters, give them a little bit of love, and then make them, make no one else love them, because now she's a tech card. Yeah. I get why it's a tech card, right? So she's going from that 3-5 ongoing ability to a 3-4 with the on reveal, remove the abilities from all end of turn cards here. This is a big change. Now, I do think that I still wanted to see an Invisible Woman First Steps change, but I think this is another interesting way to try to balance that deck. That also makes me feel like the deck wasn't fully thought through, but let's keep talking about this for a second here, because the Ghost rework Ghost just hasn't had a role in Marvel Snap. It's not been a card that anyone's been enjoying. The only time it really finds a place is with those Sarah decks that really just don't want to use Invisible Woman or even Supergiant, and they use her on turn 5 just to basically make sure that they can Shadow King Shang-Chi on the final turn, and that's it. She has not been a card that's existed in a fun place pretty much throughout her whole existence in Marvel Snap. But they also wanted to make sure that if they were going to make a change with her, they wanted it to be an impactful one. And since no one's enjoying her currently, they wanted to do this change to end of turn, and they also wanted an end of turn tech card to exist. They did. I disagree with this logic, but I also understand it straight up. And one of the last key points which I actually think is really great about this Ghost change is that they said that they wanted to ensure that the end of turn tech card was accessible. Now, this is a really big note because obviously Ghost is a Series 3 card, which means that if you are a player who is just gonna unlock her throughout your normal gameplay, you don't have to wait until you don't have to try to get to your Series 4, Series 5 cards. You don't have to spend, 3,000, 6,000 tokens on a card that answers this end of turn deck. You just have it. Most likely, everyone has Ghost in their collection. So this is a big thing as well, but it's also what they're saying is it's a narrow enough effect that they feel like it won't contribute just to the tech card soup. Those words are second dinners, not mine, even though I do agree with them 100%. Now, these are some big changes, what is it? And I think it's gonna be interesting how the end of turn deck continues to perform. They said they're gonna deal with any changes that they need to do in terms of the mid-range decks for those cost reduction nerfs for both Surge and Mr. Fantastic, as well as Ghost and Havoc, those end of turn decks, seeing if they're gonna be more balanced. And the biggest thing I think that this shows me with the Ghost change, which is the one that I feel like needs to be broken down the most, is that this makes me feel like end of turn as a deck, it doesn't feel balanced. I think that when Second Dinner introduced end of turn as a style of deck, I feel like it was potentially a mistake. And maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I'm just entirely mistaken. But the fact that they've had to do a lot of big changes to this brand new deck that they've just introduced to the game really feels like they just didn't understand the impact that this deck was going to be doing. And so it's fine technically, right? Like, I'm glad they are making these changes, but also this is a really big change to this brand new deck that they've introduced. I don't get why this card didn't come out earlier. I don't get why a lot of this stuff happened, earlier. Like, why would you make a change again to Sunspot in the last OTA rather than this change to Ghost here? I don't know. I'm not gonna pretend like I understand every single one of Second Dinner's decisions because I honestly don't. So in this change, I think it's a good change, but it just makes me feel concerned about why the end of turn deck existed in the way that it even did. But it is what it is. I'm glad that this change is being made. I think this is going to be a very solid change, and I'm glad that Ghost is going to be a playable card. We put some pretty cool stuff here, and I'm excited about this. And those are the big changes to the end of turn decks, But that's not the only deck that Secondary said they wanted to make some big changes to. The other deck they said they wanted to make some big changes to was Move. Now, Vulture is going to a 1-2 from its previous stats from a 3-3, as well as it only gets +3 power each time it moves. Now, this is a big impactful change, but there's a bigger reason behind it than just they wanted to make this card cheaper. They wanted to make Vulture better. They actually wanted to do something else. And again, like I said, a lot of these changes came in pairs. So the other half to Vulture is Human Torch. Just the basic Human Torch going to a 3-3. No changes to its text though. And this is a really big deal. Now, they've said for a bit, apparently, the entire movement package has just been balanced around Human Torch at a 1-2. Because of it being a double scaler at a cheap cost, they just said they don't believe it's feasible. This card just not being feasible is a really interesting way for me to think about it. And I hadn't thought about that either, but I can understand why they had thought that Human Torch was not a card that could exist and that good stat line for such a long period of time. I think this is going to be a big deal because not only, again, Human Torch becoming more expensive, Vulture becoming cheaper, basically them swapping stats is an interesting place for it to exist. Apparently, and I didn't know this, Killmonger was the biggest card that balanced Human Torch. And I guess it makes sense, but the waxing and waning of Killmonger and Destroy decks as a whole apparently had cascading effects on the viability of Move, where you couldn't really be playing a movement deck if Destroy was being played. And that's just it. That's because of how much power Human Torch was putting down. That was the only thing they could do. And they said they just aren't comfortable with that link. As well, they also said that it gives them a bit of synergy and a bit of potential to prop up some other cards that really they haven't felt like they've been able to put more power into because Human Torch was just absorbing all, you know, the scene right in the new Fantastic Four movie where I think it was in trailers, so minor spoilers, but like there's buildings on fire, whatever, and then Human Torch comes in and just like sucks in all the fire, and then he's like, hey, I got you, and that's it. Apparently, he was siphoning all the power away from like Move archetypes. Move Bounce being the only really playable competitive deck at in terms of Move decks at the higher points of Infinite has been a bit of something that people are just like, okay, cool, and people were fine with. But Second Dinner, I'm glad they were willing to take this change and say, you know what? They don't just want Human Torch to be a linchpin. They also wanted to make Vulture another card that they could be using, which I think is also interesting. One of the other big changes this is going to do is this is going to be a big change to Phoenix Force decks, because Phoenix Force decks in the past really, really enjoyed being able to use Human Torch just to be able to scale repeatedly and get massive amounts of power. You can't do that as much anymore. Now, you still can use the other version of Human Torch, but now Vulture is just a lot worse of an option, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like, you can't do as much with Vulture as you can, as you could, obviously, with Human Torch. And so, I say it's worse, but at the same time, Second Dinner said this needed to happen. The card is being balanced, or Vulture, the movement deck, Human Torch are all being balanced apparently around Human Torch, siphoning away the power from everything else inside of the game. So, this is a big change. It's a big shift in terms of how movement's going to go. There's a lot of implications that Second Dinner talks about here. And they also said that with this in mind, they can actually do some other buffs to some cards that they weren't able to buff in the past. Because again, Human Torch is just siphoning everything else. But with Vulture, I don't know. This is one that I'm going to say, I feel like it's cool that they're willing to make these changes with Vulture here. And again, with Human Torch, I think both of them are really interesting and really cool. I just don't know how much it's actually going to matter. I feel like for both of them, I don't know if they're going to... I feel like movement's still going to be struggling here, right? Like they had to make Human Torch really underpowered in the past, or they had to make the whole movement archetype really underpowered in the past because of Human Torch. But Vulture, to be fair, you move Vulture and it's a 1-5 immediately. So that's great. And Human Torch being a card that could just scale way too easily with a card like Aranya, as soon like they had to nerf Aranya and change her up because of Human Torch, so that now she would be giving only a +1, so that Human Torch isn't immediately a 1-6 if you've activated Aranya right beforehand. I don't know, there's a lot of stuff here just with these two cards, but the movement archetype as a whole is getting some buffs. I just don't know if it's going to be enough. With those reworks to both Vulture and Human Torch, Topaz is now a 3-5. And now she's actually just a good card. I think she's just a good on-rate card. And I feel like this is where she probably should have existed initially. And again, apparently she didn't because of Human Torch. And I feel like 3-5 is a place where you can say, all right, this card is most likely a benefit, but there's a few situations where it maybe isn't. And I think that Topaz is one of those cards where it was just like, yeah, this is, when you play her, most likely this card is giving you a benefit, but also there's a really easy chance that it isn't. So I'm glad that she is getting this additional point of power. I think that her and also Fanfei are probably two of the most underutilized cards inside of Move currently in general. And we're not seeing any change to Fanfan, unfortunately, here. And I do think that she is one that really, really should probably be being changed, because she just isn't a good card, especially with just every other movement enabler right now. She is probably one of the weaker options in the game. Now, Topaz just being a, in general, triggerable thing that kind of works whenever you need it to is really cool and really interesting. But again, I'm kind of I'm excited by this bit, but then I'm saddened by the fact that Fanfei as an activate, for one, activates just they really either hit or miss fairly heavily, unfortunately. At least that's what it feels like to me without much other information. Fanfei just feels like, okay, you're just gonna kind of ignore it at this point. Maybe the next OTA will see a big change to it, because, you know, Secondary even says that they don't even know how Move is going to be ending up at this point, but they did want to put some more numbers across movement decks in general. So Topaz here, at least going to a 3-5, I think it makes sense. This is where the card should have been, and they're doing one other change to Move decks as well. When the Marvel Snap beta first launched, Doctor Strange was a 3-2, and he's just continually kind of struggled at repeatedly, where they've kept doing little incremental buffs and changes, and with the last OTA of them willing to make these bigger sweeps to 2-cost cards, where they're just saying, hey, you know what, 2 4s, let's do it. Doctor Strange going to a 2-4, been a 3-2, 3-3, 2-3, 2-4. Gosh, we've gone a long way, Doctor Strange. Appreciate your sling ring. Your sling ring's going to be a little bit more useful, but again, it's just another point of power. And I don't know how much it's really going to matter. Again, it is only going to be the same ability, no other changes to him or Topaz, but it is going to be additional point of power. It is going to be interesting to see whether or not that Doctor Strange can be used out of a typical move list. I haven't seen him used in as many. Typically, I'm going to be seeing more, honestly, as we saw in the Golden Gauntlet recently, why not just put a tech card in there? You can throw in a Mercury, you can throw in a Cannonball, you can put in as well just even a Cosmo, a Goliath with your Madam Web, just to really shut everything else down. And I don't know if Doctor Strange is going to matter enough in that situation. I'd be interested to see it. I hope it can, but I don't have the biggest hope for him. Straight up. I think this is probably the one change in terms of just all of this OTA that I'm like, all right, I don't think this is going to make a big difference. Like, I'm glad they're willing to put more points into him. I just don't know if he's the one that you want to be putting points into. I think he did his role pretty okay-ish inside of move bounce lists, or just in general inside of a just inside of move decks currently. I didn't know that he was the one that apparently was like most needing of a buff. Now I'm assuming there must be other stats, other things that we haven't seen in terms of just his stats on the inside of Marvel Snap. But Topaz and Doctor Strange, I'm fine with Topaz getting changed, but Doctor Strange, you're going to tell me that Doctor Strange is the one who probably should get changed, and you're not going to say that Spider-Man 2099 should get a buff? Not going to tell me that we really are okay with even Zordon going to a 2-4, I think makes more sense than this. We're not going to say that, you know, there shouldn't be another change again to Fanfei, right? Like, these are the cards we're going to be wanting to say need to get these buffs in terms of the movement deck. I don't know if I love that. I think that's my biggest thing here, that these two cards really didn't feel like they were the ones that were most deserving of said buff. Maybe Topaz, but maybe not Doctor Strange. Movement decks, I'm glad, are going to be more playable, more stuff here, but I think that there are other cards that probably should have been more deserving of said buffs, of said attention, the love that Ben Brode can only provide, than probably Doctor Strange. But hey, you know what? He'll be playable. Hopefully it's going to matter. We also have White Tiger and her Tiger Spirit gaining a little bit of extra power, with the Tiger Spirit going to a 5-9 from a 5-8, and White Tiger's ability will be adjusted as such to say a 9-power Tiger. So this is a cool change. I do like that they are willing to make this change to White Tiger as a classic early card or early series card who's just kind of been weak to unplayable for a very long period of time. I'm glad. And also, one of the things that they've said in the past, that they want these 5-cost cards to find a role better. They want it to find a meaningful home, and I think that this is going to be an interesting place for White Tiger to exist at. They've had to do a lot of changes to White Tiger, it feels like. I don't know if this is going to be enough. I think that there's a chance people will be doing some sort of meme deck, I'm willing to bet, potentially with where you can go Astral Projection, Odin, into a bunch of stuff with White Tiger, and maybe you can even get some additional value with Misery plus Firehair in a White Tiger, maybe an on-reveal package. Maybe that's a legitimate deck, and me saying that it isn't doesn't mean anything. I don't know. We'll see what it matters. I'm interested in this change, I think, most of all, because it does feel like it's going to kind of nod into a bit of decks that have been unplayed in a bit. Like I said, that sort of on-reveal style of deck could just be more played. I think we saw a change to Blink in the last OTA. I forgot about that. Maybe Blink White Tiger actually matters a little bit more, so you can do the White Tiger on the final turn. Maybe that's going to be another big thing that can change. I don't know. This is just an interesting place, I think, for White Tiger to exist at, and I'm fine with them basically just trying to draw more attention to these older styles of cards. They're also kind of interesting in the fact that they do kind of work against some of the other cards we've seen work recently, where, you know, Rocket and Groot and stuff like that are going to be cards that people have been playing a lot, especially also the Guardians. At least I saw for a bit. Maybe it's not anymore, but the Guardians, cards that people are going to be wanting to use to try to get priority for Galactus First Steps ability. White Tiger can be another way to sneak some power into there. Maybe it's a world where we want to do some White Tiger Ironheart stuff in addition to, like I said, the Misery plus Firehair, or even just Odin or Astral Projection, getting some additional value from these cards. I don't know. I'm excited to see it. I'm very interested in how White Tiger is going to be existing. It's a solid change. I like it. And we're also going to have one more change to a newer released card. This is probably the one change, I think, out of every single one of the changes that has happened during this OTA that I was most kind of shocked by. I didn't actually think Terex had performed that poorly, at least according to public stats. He was fine. He wasn't anything insane, but he was, I thought, fine. He had a decent amount of play. He had a decent amount of play rate, and I guess kind of mediocre win rate. Actually, he was kind of, maybe he was not a great card. I don't know. I don't hate him going to a 3-4 though. This is probably going to be a lot of interesting stuff here. And they did say straight up, like, he's not performing well, and they aimed a little low with him, as they do apparently for any cards that can make it hard for your opponent to play the game. But they wanted to do a little bit more love to him here, because apparently at a 3-3 he wasn't making any difference. There were no real repercussions of Darkhawk decks immediately, so why not put an extra point of power into the new card, see what it does, see how the meta shakes up, as we've only had him for like a week, and it really just was a Darkhawk-less week. Darkhawk-less Lex. I can't English. But I think this is going to be a solid one. It does allow him to also fight for locations a little bit easier, which I do like, as a 3-4 more so than a 3-3. So we'll see. It also does still have the negative effect, potentially, of it putting a card into your own deck, of rock into your own deck, which is going to matter, I think, a lot. So I do like him being potentially more worthwhile for fighting for locations, as well as just a better card on rate. So a solid amount of changes, but it still leaves me a little bit wanting in terms of this OTA. In general, I think that this OTA was actually a really good one. I think it had a lot of big changes and a lot of big shakeups to the metagame, especially as the Golden Gauntlet is actively occurring. The first qualifiers happened last weekend, so I believe the second round of qualifiers will be happening sometime soon. I've got no idea, honestly. But I believe all of those are going to continue to happen, and I like that stuff here. I think these are some really good changes. One of the things that Second Dinner said that they have been doing in the past OTAs was they have been trying to reduce the amount of power that tech cards put down. They didn't do that in this OTA, and that's, I think, my biggest question here. I feel like there are some other cards that have really been a lot better than everything else in the last, month or so in Marvel Snap, and it didn't feel like that the cards that they had chosen to bring down or bring up were as big as some of the other ones. Actually, never mind. I'm just saying 2 costs definitely was good for at least the first 2 changes, but then from then onwards, I kind of questioned a little bit more other than Ghost. I don't know. Juggernaut's just a really amazing card. Second Dinner said they're never going to change Shang-Chi, and I've apparently given up on that. I don't know if they've said never, but definitely doesn't feel like they're going to. But Juggernaut definitely feels like a card that should really be probably brought down, at least in a point of power, just to make it a little bit less beneficial or something else there, because it just feels so impactful. I also think that Merlin's been a card that's just been kind of sitting there, been a very powerful card for a bit of time, and maybe that means in the next OTA, considering Second Dinner said in particular that they're going to be looking at 2-cost scalers, maybe he's going to get another hit there, because he is currently, if you play a single one of his location changing spells, he's to a 2-5, which might mean that he needs to go to a 2-2 in order to, so that it's a little bit less beneficial, but all the rest of his spells are just really beneficial. So as a base 2-3 with just a good benefit, really feels like he's going to be the outlier here in terms of 2-cost cards. Other than, of course, talking about the tech cards like Shadow King, it is what it is there. But I do think that there's a few other ones, like, honestly, Fenris Wolf is probably the last one I'd say, where it's like, yeah, not even Fenris. No. In terms of other 2-cost cards, you know what? Fenris, yeah, I think Fenris is too good. I also think that Victoria Hand, simply just too good. Mercury, too good right now, potentially. Maybe it's Cannonball. I don't know which. They're the package deal, right? I don't know which one of them I think is more powerful than the other. I don't know. There's a lot of cards inside of Second Dinner's wheelhouse right now, inside of Marvel Snap, that are just really good at what they do. Providing you a little bit too much benefit for these tech cards is just a bit annoying, and I'm glad Second Dinner said in the past they've been looking at this stuff, and they have hit other stuff in the past, right? And even in this OTA, they are taking down these cards that are just good inside of tech decks, like I said, with Mr. Fantastic First Steps and Surge. I like all that bit, but at the same time, they're going to put power into Mobius instead of bringing that back down, which I don't love as much. I also think Frigga's just an amazing card. I think Frigga's the card that if I had to say, if Second Dinner said, hey, what's a card that you probably, you know, you just remove 1 point of power from? It's 50-50 between Juggernaut and Frigga. Because honestly, it's going to sound weird that I'm mentioning Frigga there, but Frigga just feels like a consistent enabler for so many types of decks, whereas Juggernaut's just an unfun card. Maybe Negasonic-y, I don't know, there's a bunch of cards where I'm like, you could just take 1 more point away from power, and it'd be fine. I just don't want it as much. I don't think we need as much of this right now. I'm probably at this point just whining, as in general, this is a really good OTA, and I'm happy about it. I just it's a good OTA, so it leaves me wanting more in comparison to the last couple of OTAs where I'm like, all right, there's a sense of finality here. This it is what it is. I don't want more of this. Whereas this one just feels so good, honestly. I'm like, yeah, but okay, keep going. Why are you stopping here? You don't need to stop at 10. You can keep going. Hit me with 20 changes. All right. We've got like, I think we're at like 390 cards in Marvel Snap. At the end of the season, maybe, I think is how many we're going to have. 390. Maybe it's yeah, at the end of the season, I think it's 390 or 389. It's like something around there. I don't know. But in general, amazing OTA, really great changes. And let me know what you think as well down below in the comments, because I'm interested in your opinions. Appreciate everyone hanging out during this video. And I'm glad y'all hopefully enjoyed all the videos I did last week. We're calming down this week because we don't have 19 cards getting released. But I appreciate all y'all hanging out here today. I'll see y'all around pretty soon for another fun video this weekend. Peace out. Have a good one.